Hello everyone, and welcome to another Tech Tips video from Sam. We recently posted a video explaining what Arcade is and how you can use it in the Esri ArcGIS platform. If you've not seen that video, you'll see a link to it above and in the video description below. Make sure to check it out if you haven't done so already. In this video, we're going to take a bit of a deeper dive into Arcade and look more closely at some of its basic syntax. Though Arcade is just an expression language, not a full-blown programming language, it does require some specific structure to accomplish actions within the code or the expressions that you write. In this video, we're going to show you some of the proper syntax you'll use for many basic common operations that you'll include in Arcade expressions that you create. This will include doing things like retrieving attribute values from a table, defining a variable, adding comments into your code, adding and formatting text, and then how to use operators within the code. As you start creating your Arcade expressions, one of the key capabilities of this expression language is to access and retrieve attributes from associated features. Accessing those values opens up a world of capability for labeling, analyzing, displaying, and manipulating your data by using these Arcade expressions. Luckily, accessing that information is pretty easy. It's at the core functionality within Arcade, and the syntax to do so is not very difficult. So when you go to access the attributes for features that you see in your maps or records within a table, it is really fairly straightforward. You're going to use the $feature global variable. This would then be followed by the name of the field that you wish to work with. So for example, if you want to label each parcel with its parcel ID number, and that number is stored in the parcel_no field within the attribute table, you could create a simple expression that said $feature period parcel_no, as you see here. Of course, you're not limited to just accessing a single field. You can retrieve values from multiple fields within an expression, and you can string those together or combine those using a plus sign. So let's go take a look at this in ArcGIS Pro and see how that works. So here we are in ArcGIS Pro, and you can see we have labels turned on for the water lines that are just pointing to the materials field from the attribute table. If I click the expression button, this is going to take me into the label class pane, and we can see the expression area here within this pane. This is where you'll create, for labeling, the Arcade expressions that you wish to use. So if I want to add additional fields to this, if I want to say label this by both the material and the size, I'll add a plus, and then I can go scroll through the fields that are up here, and there's a size field right there. Double click it, so you can see there's that global variable $feature period size underscore, because that's the name of the field that we see up here. And when I hit apply to that, and I now move this out of the way, you can see that it's now displaying both the material and the size. Now we'll learn a little bit more going on about better formatting and things that we could add. But for example, if we want to clean this up a little bit and say we want to add a space between those two values, we'll put in a double quote, a space, a closed double quote, and another plus. And as you're writing these, if you want to, you can always validate by clicking the check button here to validate, so the expression is valid. Again, I'm going to click apply. And once again, as we move this out of the way, you can see there's now a space between those. So this allows me to string multiple attribute values together, concatenate or combine them as I want to within my expression. So as you can see, that was fairly easy to do, not overly complicated. The syntax is pretty straightforward. So with that, let's move on to the next syntax item. So the next thing we're going to talk about is variables. If you've written any code for, say, Python or HTML or JavaScript or C# or any other type of programming language, variables are not a new concept. Variables allow you to store a value for use later in your expression. Variables can make writing code simpler by allowing you to define the value for a variable once, and then you can reference that throughout your code. Variables can be a single value, they can reference an equation or an operation, so they can be quite flexible, as you're about to see. So if you're going to define a variable or declare a variable in Arcade, you're going to do that within the code by using the keyword var, V-A-R, followed by an equal sign, then whatever value you're assigning to that variable, as you can see in some of these examples. Unlike other languages such as Python, in Arcade, variables aren't case sensitive, meaning that if, for example, here you see var owner, all in lowercase, equals Tripp, that I can reference that later with an uppercase O in owner, and it means the same thing. So let's now go into ArcGIS Pro and show you how you can define a variable in an Arcade expression. So here we are back in ArcGIS Pro, working again with the water lines and the labels there. So here you can see the expression that we created earlier where we're labeling each water line by both the material and size. Now if I wanted to make a variable from either one of these values, I can do that very simply. So I can go in here and go var mat, for that's what I'm calling the variable, equals this. Go down here, var, again defining another variable for size. Oops, let's spell that correctly. Size equals. So now within this expression I've defined two variables. I have one variable called mat that is going to equal the value stored in the material field within the attribute table, and I have another variable called size that's going to equal the size underscore field. So now in here I can just create a label that is mat. Again, use my plus sign, quote, space, quote, plus size. Validate that to make sure it's correct. And when I apply that, it's doing the same thing. But now what happens is I can go in and use this variable mat and or size in my expression as I continue to build it out. If I want to do things with, say, if it's a certain size or less, label it one way, or if it's a certain size or greater, label it a different way with logical expressions, or logical operators I should say. I can do that without having to go $ period material. I can use the shorter mat to reference back to that value stored in that material or that size there. So again, this really increases the flexibility and the ease of creating code with your expression in Arcade. And we'll talk more about some of those operators, logic that you can build into your code a little bit later on in the video. With that, let's move on to our next topic with syntax and start talking about how do we add comments to our code. So if anybody has written code and then had to go back later and tried to figure out what was going on, you know that being able to put extra information into that code that explains what's happening in a certain section or a certain function within the code is extremely helpful. And that's what we are talking about when we're talking about adding comments. Comments are just notes within your code that you insert that provide additional descriptive information of why a specific part of the code exists and what it's supposed to do. And this is very helpful, later on if you have to give your code to somebody else to use or to update or change, or 6 months later you're trying to go back through and make changes to the code because a new version of ArcGIS has come out. And you're trying to determine, why did you pick this method for doing what you did? Because as anybody that's worked with ArcGIS knows, there's usually more than one way to accomplish a task. And this is certainly true when you're creating arcade expressions, as there's often more than one function you could use to accomplish the same thing. For example, you may use if or else if, or you could also possibly use a when statement. And either one of those might work. So why did you choose if, else if instead of when? Or why did you pick when over the other? Putting comments in your code to explain why you chose that can be helpful later on when you're looking to update this code, or you take somebody else's code and are trying to tweak it to what you're doing. These kind of things can really be helpful to understand what's happening within the code. So within Arcade, there are different types of comments you can put in there. You can do a single line comment, or you can do a multi-line comment. Which one you want to use depends on your situation and the code you're looking at the time, what you're trying to document. All of those kind of things are really going to be the determining factor on whether you do single line or multi-line within there. The thing is, when you put these in, when Arc is processing your code, anytime it sees a comment indicator, it knows to ignore everything from that point until that is over. So if you're doing a single line comment, or let me rephrase it, to create a single line comment in your expression, you're going to use double forward slashes, as you can see here. Single line comments are really good to provide short, quick notes about a small part of your code. For example, here, why did you create this variable, this var pin? Why does that exist in your code? Great situation where a single line comment would be very helpful in explaining, again, why that variable exists. What's its purpose? If you need to create a multi-line comment, you want to use a / asterisk or star to start the comment. At that point, ArcGIS knows anything after the / star asterisk it can ignore. That's just notes you're putting in the code. It doesn't have anything to execute. From there, you can put in all the notes that you want. This is very good to use, say, at the front end of a complicated expression that you're creating that explains why is this expression there? Does it have a specific purpose? Does it work with a specific layer? Was it created with a specific version of ArcGIS, or ArcPro or Enterprise or Arc Online? Where you're really putting a lot of descriptive information in there that's more than just a quick note. Okay? Now, once you've put in all the notes you need to, you want to end that with a star or asterisk and another / That then tells ArcGIS, once it sees that star, asterisk, / that you're done with your comment, and everything going past that is code that it needs to execute. And so here you see a good example of that multi-line comment where we're telling the user, the programmer, developer, what this expression was created in, what version of ArcPro and Arc Enterprise it was written for, those kind of things. So this is just a good example of when to use a multi-line comment. Now, in a single expression, you can have a combination of single line comments and multi-line comments. You're not restricted on only using single line in one expression or just using multi-line. You can mix and match within your code as you see fit. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into Pro and just actually see some of these being entered into your code, into your expressions in Arcade. Okay, so here we have an expression that we're using to label census blocks, whether they're low density, medium density, or high density population. So you can see that expression that is written in here to accomplish that. We have a couple of variables. We're using a when statement in here to generate those returns. So we want to go ahead and add some comments to kind of explain what's going on within this code. So we're going to start at the top and put in a multi-line comment. So we'll do our slash and then our star asterisk. So now notice how it turned everything blue. That means it's ignoring everything after that point as a comment. So we're going to enter here, enter again, and now I'm going to put in here this expression is used to label or symbolize population density So you can see I'm just putting in some descriptive information that would let somebody coming in know what this expression can be used for. Are there certain requirements for it to work? You know. And so on, right? It's written for ArcGIS Pro 3.x. And so that's, again, just giving you an idea of the different lines. So now I'm going to end this comment with, again, a star and then a slash. Now notice when I put that star slash in there, that now the rest of the expression is showing up in different colors, back to what it looked like before I started putting in my comments. Okay, so there I put in that multi-line comment. Now let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger in here so I can get more space. There we go. So now I want to put in some single line comments that maybe explain what's going on in other parts of the code, like here with what this variable does. I'm hitting that again, slash slash. So by using the double slashes, I've now putting in a single line comment. Oops. Go. Explaining what this does. All right, so I just put in a comment that just says this variable calculates the area in square miles. And again, I could continue to go through and add additional comments within this expression if I wanted to, explaining like what the var popdin does, why I use the when versus if else if logic that you see down here. But this gives you an idea of how you can easily enter in these comments into your code to provide additional descriptive information, so that again, 6 months later when you're looking at this and having to update it because something's changed, you know what was going on and why you did what you did the way you did it. So let's move on to our next item. Okay, now we're going to move on to how you can add text to your expressions and then format that text. Adding text can be used for several things within Arcade, such as creating labels on a map, updating values in a table, providing additional descriptive information for use with symbology or legends, and a whole lot more, as you'll see illustrated as we go forward with this. So as you're creating your expressions, if you want to add specific text to an expression, you can do this using double quotation marks. This lets ArcGIS know that the text between those double quotations contains a specific value you wish to be returned. Normally, this specific text is combined with other parts of an expression, so it provides additional information or clarification, as you'll see in a moment. Okay, so we're here in ArcGIS Pro, so I can kind of illustrate what I was just talking about with the double quotes within an expression. Hopefully you remember this. This is the water lines that we had worked with earlier and created the expression to label it with the material and pipe size. And this isn't bad. The only problem is we've got a number here that is undefined, right? We don't know 6 what. Is that 6 inches, 6 meters, 6 centimeters? We need to clarify what that is. So we want to add some text at the end of that that would clarify what that is. So we're going to go into the expression that we had created earlier. We did that by going to the labeling tab and clicking the expression button here. And now we're going to go down here into our expression window. Now you can already see an example of where I inserted a space, right? So there's those double quotes I was telling you about, and then the space in between them. So Arc is already interpreting that as a text space to be included. But if I want to add, say, this is in inches, so I want to add the letters IN to identify that that's in inches. I'm going to go ahead and put the plus, a closed, or a double quote I should say, IN for inches, the abbreviation, and close that quote. So what will happen is IN is going to be added to the end of the size. As we'll see in a minute, again, let's validate just to make sure I haven't made a mistake. It says it's valid, so I'm going to click apply. And then we'll move this out of the way so you can see it. So now you can see that IN is after that. So we get 6 IN. So we now know that is in inches. Now, if that's too close, I wanted to put a space in there. I could come back in to the expression here. In between the quotes, add a space. Again, validate to make sure it's all good. Now, you don't have to validate every time if you know it's good. It's just a good thing to check, especially if you're learning. So now I put a space in there. Okay. So you can see that it's very simple to add basic text. It returns that specific value that I put in there. So let's go back and talk about some other things we can do with text. When you are displaying text with an expression, you may want to customize the appearance of that text. You can do this with Arcade using text tags. Here you see some of the commonly used text tags that will allow you to do things like change the font or the color, whether that font is bold or italicized or underlined. As we go forward, these can be used to really help call out that part of the text, make it stand out, just like you would in any sort of like Word document or spreadsheet or whatnot. So here you can see some of the text formatting tags that you'll use. So you're going to have FNT for font. That's going to allow you to change either the font name, do you want Times New Roman, Arial, or something else, or the font size. 12-point font, 24-point font, something else, right? So you can customize that. So especially when you're, say, creating a label, that you can make that label be exactly what you want it, and different parts of the label can look differently as you go through that. The next thing would be the color. So CLR is how you change color, and you can do this either with RGB or CYMK. And in that you would then specify, I want blue to be this value, red to be this value, green to be this value, and so on. So you would be able to put those in there, again, to change the color of a part of a font. Again, a lot of times this is done with labeling. Bold is going to be BOL. Italicized, ITA, and underline UND. Now notice that all of these have the greater than, less than sign on either side of it. This is very similar to using tags if you've ever done HTML type coding in there. So you're going to have an opening tag, which is going to be just the tag itself in between the greater than, less than sign. in there, and then you've got to close that tag, and that's going to be with a / the same letter identifier, CLR for color, BOL for bold, again between the less than greater than signs as you see illustrated here. Now if you're building this as part of a label expression like we were just doing before, you'll also need to put these tags inside of the double quotes. Again, this tells Arc to interpret that code as part of a text string, as it were, so that it knows that that's what it's doing. It's returning a result that it's displaying with that tag, whether it's bold or italicized or underlined. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into ArcGIS Pro and continue to look at how this works. Okay, so here we are back in ArcGIS Pro. We're once again working with the census blocks, and currently we're labeling them with our population density. So we have 4.35, 1.73, and again, these are great numbers, but they really don't tell us what anything is, right? We don't know what that 4.35 means. So we want to add some text to this label that again provides it with a little bit more information, tells us what that number is. So again, go back up to the labeling tab, click my expression button here, and then you can see that this is the current expression that I have. I have a variable called popped in that is defined as being the field with this name, which is the total population, being divided by the area in acres, and then I'm actually rounding that number. You see I'm using the round command to 2 decimal places. Okay, so and then I'm returning that variable value as my label right there. What I want to do is again clarify this a little bit more. So let's start by just telling folks what this is. So we're going to add some text that says this is the population density per acre. Okay. So we again validate just to make sure we haven't got a typo in there, and we go apply. And so you can see over here that now we've added that descriptive text in there. It's running together, so we should probably put a space or something in here to take care of that. So we will. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and put a colon and a space. I'll apply that to see if it clears things up a little bit. And yep, that does. But now we want to go ahead and maybe make some things stand out a little bit more, make this descriptive text, pop, right? Make it really stand out. So let's do that by, I don't know, let's start by underlining it maybe? Yeah, let's do that. So we're going to underline that, and we're going to do another quote. And remember, the underline is UND, so we're going to do the less than sign, UND, greater than sign, at least I think that's what that's called. Again, quote, and a plus. Now we've opened that tag. Whoops, went too far. But you can see we've opened that tag, right? We put this tag in here. Now we need to close that tag. So we're going to close it here. Okay, so now we've closed that tag, and we need to put that in quotes, in the double quotes, like so. Again, validate that to see what we get and hit apply. And get a second to redraw, and now you can see it's underlined, that popped in there. So again, making it stand out a little bit more. Maybe that doesn't stand out enough. Maybe we want to make it better or just a little bit more bold, right? So let's make this bold, because you can use more than one formatting tag within your expression. So we're going to add the bold. So we're just going to put it inside this set of quotes. Right, so now we've opened that bold tag. Now we're going to, again, we have to close that in there. Okay, so we've added that. Now again, let's validate it. And then we can apply that. Whoops, something didn't go right. What did I do wrong? I think I got these out of order. So let's see if that was the case. There we go. So, that just goes to show, even though the syntax was valid and it verified, that doesn't necessarily mean that your code is 100% correct. In putting these tags in, you've got to keep them in order. So, because I started with bold here on the outside, I needed to finish with bold here on the far side so that it works, kind of like a mathematical expression, right? You've got to keep things grouped properly. So that's what happened there, and you see that now this is bold and underlined just like we have it here. So with that, let's go and talk about a few other formatting things you can do with text to help improve your labeling and your text returns a little bit. So as I kind of hinted at, Arcade has other text formatting capabilities beyond just changing the font settings. You can do some additional things such as inserting line breaks into a text string or label. The syntax to do this is to use the text formatting .new line code as you see here. One thing that you do need to remember when you're trying to format text is what label engine are you using within ArcGIS? Remember that ArcGIS has two labeling engines. One is the standard label engine, the other is the Maplex label engine. By default in ArcGIS Pro at least, the Maplex label engine is the default one that is used. That can present some problems when you're trying to format text labels. The Maplex label engine has settings in there, if you've used this, to automatically create new lines, to fit text, to reduce font size, and so on. And these settings with that Maplex label engine can, or will, I should say, override your Arcade expression. So if you you create an expression, especially for labeling, and say, for example, you do use this text formatting .new line capability, if you notice that the label isn't splitting into a separate line where you put it in your expression, there's a very good chance that the Maplex label engine is overriding that because of some settings that it has. So you do need to be aware of that as you're creating these settings within your Arcade expression. Now, there will also be times when you're trying to create an expression that includes things that are considered reserved characters. Reserved characters or reserved words are words or characters that are used by the programming language itself. So, for example, the double quotes to indicate a text string that we've seen. So if you want to include those types of characters in your strings or in your return values, there are certain syntax you have to use to do that. For example, if you want to include double quotes within the return text string, you're going to have to use the text formatting .double quotes. So you can see that example here, where I'm trying to put the what the value, or let me rephrase that, what R1, the zoning classification R1 equals, right? So I'm creating a text string or a label that is pulling the value from the zoning class field, and then adding a descriptor to that that says what that equals. So in this case, R1 equals single family residential. Okay? Again, I'm putting that in double quotes by using the text formatting double quote command or syntax in there. And there's others for single quotes, backslashes, and forward slashes, all of which are reserved characters, as we've seen in the syntax for Arcade. So just remember, you've got to use that text formatting dot whatever, be it backslash, forward slash, single quote, double quote, if you need to return those as part of your expression. And you have examples of all that here on the slide. So the next thing we want to talk about are operators. As you're starting to see, Arcade expressions can range from very simple to very complex depending on the purpose. As a result, Arcade supports the use of operators that allow you to use logic or math to calculate or compare values, as well as define conditional statements within your expressions. So let's take a look at some of the operators that are supported in Arcade. So there's several different types of operators that are supported. We're going to start with the mathematical operators, and these are pretty self-explanatory or not uncommon in other applications. So you can use these types of operators that you see here to calculate values within an expression. And you saw that with one of the ones we did earlier, where we were dividing the value of a field by another field or another value to return a calculated value. And this is not unlike what you do when you're working in an Excel spreadsheet to calculate a value into a cell and whatnot. But again, you can see those that are available here for addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, to determine the modulus, to just go ahead and increment a value by 1 or decrease a value by 1. So all of these are available in Arcade as you're creating some of these expressions. Now there are also some logical operators. You can use logical operators to compare values with one another. This can be used when you're creating conditional statements in your code as part of a query, or if or else if statements or when statements. And this isn't something new, right? If you've done queries, select by attribute queries, say for example in ArcGIS, the concept of logical operators makes sense to you. It's just that how they're written in Arcade's a little different. For example, if you want to use an and, so that if this and that are true, then do this, right? So that is called a logical and. In Arcade, you would use double ampersand signs to represent that logical and. So you can see an example of that over here, where I'm saying if the zoning value is equal to, and equal is a double equal sign, residential, and I'm using that logical and with the two ampersand signs. So and the use is equal to vacant, that's going to return a true statement. All others would be false. Okay? So if that is true, then you would do something to it. You know, return some value or symbolize it some way or label it some way, whatever you're going to do with that there, right? So that logical and is that double ampersand. If you want to use the logical or, that's the two parallel lines that you see here. So again, we have an example of that. If the population is greater than 25,000, or the double parallels, the population is less than 75,000, that returns true, and then you would do something with that, else do something different, because those all those others would then be false. Now if you want to do, say, not equal to, that's where you're going to use an exclamation point. The exclamation point is the equivalent of a not. So not equal to would be the exclamation point with the equal sign. Not less than would be the exclamation point and then the less than sign. And again, so you can combine that not with these others, the greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, or just plain equal to. So you can do that. in there. So these are just some of those logical operators that are supported within Arcade. And I'll bring up some examples of this in ArcGIS Pro now. Okay, so we're back in ArcGIS Pro. We're looking at our census blocks again, but instead of labeling, let's look at something to do with symbology. So here you can see that I'm symbolizing it, whether it's a high density area, low density, or medium density area, and this is done through an Arcade expression. So I'm going to go up here and click on the Set Expression button to open my Expression Builder window, and then down here you can see the expression that I'm using. You can see I've got some mathematical operators in here. So I'm dividing the shape area field by a conversion value here to get square miles. And then I'm determining the population density by dividing the total population field, which is this one, by the value returned from square miles to get me the total population density per square mile. Okay? But then down here, I'm using if statements to generate those returns, whether it's low density, medium density, or high density, because there is no field in my attribute table that identifies it as one of these values. I'm having to calculate that. And so I'm using the operators that you see here. So if population den, this pop den variable that we've calculated up here, is less than or equal to, so there's that logical operator, this value, 1,335, it's returning a value of low density. Okay. Else if that same variable that's been calculated is greater than 1,335, and using that logical and with the double ampersand signs, that variable popped in is less than or equal to 1,955, return medium density. Else, meaning if it's not one of these two, return high density. So you can see the logical operators that I'm using in here. I'm using the greater than, less than or equal to, get less than or equal to up here with the logical ands in here. So these are just some good examples of those operators that we were just talking about, where we're using them to compare the value. So is this less than or equal to this value? If so, do this. If that variable is less than this value and it's also less than or equal to, I should say greater than this value, and that variable is less than or equal to this value, then return this as a result. So again, I'm comparing the data using these operators. So hopefully this just gives you an idea of how you can utilize these expressions, I should say, use these operators when you're creating your expressions in ArcGIS. So there you have it, some basics about the Arcade syntax. Of course, there's a lot more capability in Arcade, but if you're new to Arcade, this should help get you started, give you some basic understanding of the required syntax. So I really hope you found this video to be informative and valuable to you. If so, please make sure to give it a like, and if you haven't done so, make sure you subscribe to the SAM channel so you can be notified when future videos are released. Make sure if you have any questions or suggestions for future video topics to put those down in the comments below, right? And we'll respond to those as soon as we can. With that, we really do appreciate you watching and supporting the channel. And remember, if you do have any geospatial needs, feel free to reach out. SAM offers a full range of geospatial services across the United States and Canada, and we'd love to help you out there. So with that, thanks everybody, and we look forward to seeing y'all in the next video.